Yes, I do.
I can usually be relied on to spill mine, so that should add to the fun.
Especially if it's hot.
Well, I was introducing someone at Intertraffic, Pat, and I actually fell onto the stage, and no one caught it on video, unfortunately, but I wish they had. I wasn't injured.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Café IBTTA. I'm Pat Jones. My guest today is Adam Hill. Adam is the editor of ITS International Magazine, the publication for anyone involved in advanced technology for traffic management and urban mobility. Adam is also a regular member of the daily news teams, which report from key global ITS events, such as the ITS World Congress. Beginning his career in 1994 as a business journalist in transportation, Adam edited publications and websites across a range of industries before joining ITS International in 2018. Adam holds a BA in English from the University of Birmingham and lives in London with his wife and teenage daughter. He's also a lifelong fan of the England cricket team, which he describes as more of a calling rather than something you actually enjoy. Adam, welcome to Café IBTTA. It's great to have you with us.
Pat, thank you so much. It's great to be here. It's just another thing I've ticked off my bucket list.
Wonderful, wonderful. Me too, me too. Well, a big shout out this morning to Neil Peterson. Last week, Neil, who's the executive director of the Transportation Research Board of the National Academy of Sciences, announced his retirement. He'll stay on with TRB through the fall while the National Academies finds his successor and for the transition to occur well in advance of the 2023 annual meeting. Neil was an active volunteer in TRB for over 30 years and served in numerous TRB volunteer roles for more than 15 years before joining TRB. Neil spent 29 years at the Maryland Department of Transportation, where he served the last 8 years as the state highway administrator and the governor's highway safety representative. Neil is a great friend and colleague. He was a guest on this program on April 7th of last year. Neil, we thank you for your decades of dedicated service to transportation and wish you well in this next chapter of your life. Godspeed, my friend. Well, this is Café IBTTA, where we drink coffee and talk about things that are interesting, relevant, uplifting, and fun. And we are taking your questions today, and we want to get started right away. I mentioned that Adam is a big fan of cricket, of the England cricket team. So in the chat function, type a word or phrase that expresses your thoughts or feelings about the sport of cricket. Tell us about your thoughts and feelings about the sport of cricket. Buggy. Classy. How can one game go 3 days?
Oh, 5 days, actually. We can do 5 days.
I'm terrible, but I have fun. Don't know the rules. Yeah. Confusing. Yeah. So what is this buggy term? Does that resonate with you, Adam?
I confess it doesn't, which I'm really sorry. But no, it doesn't at all. But I'm intrigued to hear more, because perhaps it will reveal itself as we go.
Perhaps it will reveal itself. And I think we'll come back to a discussion of cricket later in the program and your joy and passion for it. And Jenna wants to know, how does it compare to American baseball? So lots of interest in cricket, and we'll come back to that. But first, Adam, we want to talk about the early years of Adam Hill. And maybe you could talk to us about your background by giving us a little geography of accents, sort of an accent tutorial. You mentioned to me that you were brought up in the south of England, but you went to university in the middle of England, where you say they have a funny accent. And then we have someone like Fiona Hill, a U.S. national security expert who rose to, became sort of a minor celebrity here in the U.S. during certain hearings in the last administration. And she has a different accent entirely. So tell us, Adam, give us a little accent tutorial.
Well, Pat, you're quite right. So I was born in and brought up in the south of England, but I went to university in Birmingham, which is pretty much as close to the centre of England as you can get. And the accent there is considered funny. But I think what going to university there has given me is a real affection for the city. And it's a city that is sometimes derided by the English, quite wrongly, and so is their accent, which is actually lovely and very warm. But accents are quite a key indicator still, I think, in the UK. And the Fiona Hill example is a really interesting one because, of course, she's risen to great prominence in her work in the US, but left, she says, because she felt her accent would have held her back in her native England, which is desperately sad. She comes from a place called County Durham in the northeast of England, which again is the most lovely accent. And ironically, it's often one that is taken to be very trustworthy, very warm, very open, which is in some ways the complete opposite of you would think someone who wants to leave because that accent is going to hold them back. But equally, I can quite understand 30 odd years ago why she would have felt that. But it is a shame. But I think accents, the UK is very, very small. I mean, it would fit 3 times into Texas. There's another 10 states into which it would fit comfortably once, which is extraordinary. But we do have this range of accents. I know you do in the US too, of course. And I think what's interesting is that I'd be considered to have an accent that would be quite neutral, whereas perhaps the further north you go in the UK, accents become more obvious and more recognizable. But I guess that's the same everywhere, of course. And I don't know about you, Pat, how you are with British accents. But with American accents, I can probably pick out confidently maybe 2 or 3 areas. So maybe it takes a lifetime of living somewhere before you can pick this sort of stuff up.
Right. It's paying attention to the details, isn't it?
Sure.
And paying attention to the details is something you do in your career in journalism. A lot of people around you thought you would naturally gravitate to journalism, but you weren't so sure. Tell us a little bit about your early life and how you chose journalism as a career.
Well, I think it's probably youthful idiocy which led me to reject journalism in the first place, because at school I could always write well. It was a very, very obvious fit for me. And I think because so many people said that's what you should do, I think perhaps you simply reject that on the grounds that if it's what everyone wants you to do, it can't possibly be true. But fortunately, I then stumbled into it anyway. So it's all worked out. It's all worked out quite well.
Now, Adam, you've been working for ITS International since 2018, so going on 4 years. Tell us about your particular niche in this industry and the kinds of things that you focus on. And perhaps for the uninitiated, tell us what ITS is.
Sure, and I think we don't explain it enough. Whereas we all make assumptions that perhaps people know what we're talking about, and we just and quite understandably, they just don't. ITS stands for Intelligent Transportation Systems. So ITS International, as the name suggests, is a global magazine. Although we're based in the UK, but we have a large readership in North America, Europe, and also Asia. And we deal with advanced technology for traffic management and urban mobility. So that's everything from traffic signal sequencing at intersections right up to autonomous vehicles and drones. So there's a big range that we cover.
All right. Now, I took special notice of the March-April edition of ITS International, in which you wrote a major feature story about the interest of private equity and venture capital providers in the whole ITS field. In your reporting, you wrote, smart money does not tend to chase in different companies in low growth industries. And recent research suggests the sector will be worth between $90 billion and $120 billion by 2025. Tell us more about this rapidly growing sector.
Well, thank you for your interest, because we'd noticed that private equity investment and venture capital was coming more and more into the ITS sector. There have been a number of big deals recently. So, for example, one of the major companies in the sector, Cubic, was sold to PE last year for $2.8 billion. Siemens also last year spun off its subsidiary Unex Traffic for nearly €1 billion. And that was bought by an Italian group, Atlantia. They're better known for managing airports and motorways, but they see a value in ITS. And they're not alone. There's a buzz. It's a tech-led sector, which means that there are opportunities for market leadership or differentiation. There are a number of large established companies who are doing their thing very successfully in traffic technology, but weaving in and out around them are a number of smaller, younger players who are looking to use AI, machine learning, looking at connected and autonomous vehicles, smart cities, and so on. So I think that's where the part of the interest from investors has come. You know, and there's a number of factors behind that, which we can talk about.
Adam, also in your reporting, you note that there are just as many sizes of investors as there are sizes of companies to invest in. Small to medium-sized ITS firms that people can see the value of. And none of this is new, but it's new to you. You're looking at it in a concerted way, and there's a range of reasons why investors are interested in the companies. Tell us a little more about that.
Well, you're right. There isn't anything new fundamentally about private equity interest in the intelligent transportation sector. So, for example, a couple of very well-known companies in the sector, Trafficware and Urbula Design, were both owned by PE at one time. When I spoke to a number of investors, two words that kept coming up in relation to ITS. The first was confluence, and the second was tailwinds. In other words, they felt that things are coming together in ITS. So ITS is a niche industry, but I think what its products and solutions can do is coming into the mainstream. So what I mean by that is cities are getting bigger. We are, as a world, we are becoming urbanized. That brings problems such as air quality, congestion, and so on. And traffic management, which is something that's very much at the root of the ITS industry, that can help. Similarly, climate change is real. And traffic technology is a way of mitigating emissions by creating less congested, less polluting traffic. Other innovations in the ITS sector, such as something called mobility as a service, which allows individuals to access a range of public and private transport options, but will often favor public transit, can help reduce car reliance. And also, don't forget, mobility is seen, I think, as an essential for successful economies. So, I mean, look at the US. We just had the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So, and I think all of these things lead on to perhaps the biggest one of all, which maybe we can talk a bit about, but that's road safety. Road safety now is a huge issue, and it's one that perhaps was, I wouldn't suggest for 1 minute, ignored, but I've certainly spoken to one or two people in the traffic industry who said maybe 15 years ago, it wasn't really seen as a market, which I don't wish to sound, I don't think there is a cynicism to that. It's simply that I don't think it was far enough up the political agenda, perhaps. And I think that's maybe when things start to happen, is when, and it goes back to this idea of ITS perhaps moving more into the mainstream. This is where that convergence happens, that road safety is something now and is being considered very seriously by city authorities, roadway authorities. Similarly, air pollution, air quality is also something that it really matters to people. And I think That's why ITS is in a good place at the moment, because it produces products and solutions which can help in both of those and many others.
Adam, you talk about it, safety, as perhaps not being very high on the political agenda, and perhaps action on climate change not very high either. And it's one of those, these are those types of problems that you see, the changes seem to be very incremental. It's different from when you think of safety in the airline industry, you think of an airplane dropping out of the sky and you lose 100 to 300 people, and it's very visible. But the number of people that you see, you don't see 100 people being lost on a highway every day, even though it's actually happening. You don't see it all in one event. And
Sure.
We tend to be lulled into this false sense of security or ignorance about this.
Well, I think it's very, very easy to become desensitized, because if you think that just on US roads, 40,000 people are killed every year. Now, they're obviously their personal tragedies, but I think it's too easy to see them perhaps as numbers. And I think that is changing. And certainly in ITS and other areas, there is the ability with connected vehicle technology, whatever it may be, that we can do more about it. And of course, one of the most shocking things in the pandemic was that even though the amount of driving dropped, casualties actually went up, that's an extraordinary figure, which suggests obviously that yes, there was less driving, but it was perhaps much worse. And those sorts of things are very worrying, I think. And that is something that ITS companies can help with. So it's, and I wouldn't mean to suggest, I think, that people that authorities don't care about safety. I'm sure they do. And I think increasingly they do. And I think, but as with so many things, it's when it really, when you get some sort of groundswell of public opinion, like you have with climate change, like you have with air quality, perhaps, that's when politicians, policymakers tend to take note.
Our guest is Adam Hill. He's a journalist and the editor of the magazine ITS International. We are taking your questions. Please put them in the chat function using all panelists and attendees, or everyone. Adam, you mentioned the pandemic, and also in your reporting, you write that COVID has sparked renewed interest in different transport modes, in particular active ones such as walking and cycling. And the rise of micromobility is reshaping the look and feel of cities. How do those conditions make ITS more attractive to investors?
Well, I think COVID has presented, as many people have said, an opportunity for some sort of reset. Clearly, it's been an awful couple of years for a lot of people around the world. Things are heading back to normal now, but I think many of us have enjoyed improved air quality and perhaps the chance to walk or cycle in more safety. So in terms of investment in ITS and in terms of the attractiveness of the sector, you come back to things like road safety. Increasingly now, cyclists, e-scooters, pedestrians, they're sharing road space with cars. A lot of our road space, and this is in countries all over the world, has been reallocated. Now, how do we keep them all safe? Technology can help. So I think that's another element of interest that will make people look at the sector and think, this is actually, ITS has the potential to be life-saving, life-changing. It's a sector in which you might, people will actually really want to get stuck into it. They don't need to go to, if you're a software engineer or a data analyst, both of which are very, very important for the ITS industry. You don't need to go to Google or Apple or wherever else to make a difference. You can do it in the ITS sector. You might get paid less, but I mean, especially given the amount of money coming into ITS at the moment, I suspect that a number of interesting wage negotiations will be going on anyway. So, but, we'll see. I think it's a sector that's just got a lot going for it. I think COVID, the reset, is going to, and already has made changes in the way that we get about. We are getting back to something more like normality in inverted commas, but how far that goes remains to be seen. I suspect there'll be some, if you like, there'll be at least some good hangover from the COVID pandemic, to go along with, what has frankly been a really awful time for so many people. So, yeah.
Friends and colleagues, you heard it here first. If you're an engineer or a data analyst, you don't have to go to Google or Apple to make a living. You can stay in the ITS industry on the authority of Adam Hill. It's a good place to be, isn't it?
Definitely. Stay here or come here. Absolutely.
Now, Adam, the whale of a meeting each year in the ITS industry is Intertraffic in Amsterdam. And you were just there. The event happened last week, and you were there with the Daily News team. Tell us, who are the people who are attending this event, and what is the role of your publication in this event?
Well, Pat, they are companies from pretty much all over the world. Even in COVID times, there were representatives from over 100 countries. So numerous exhibitors, thousands of visitors, and they're across the range of transport and mobility. So road safety, sustainability, traffic management, parking, smart infrastructure, software, hardware. There's an awful lot of stuff there that is not just pure ITS. It goes into things like road barriers that you might associate with the harder edge, if you like, of the transportation sector. So it's a range, and the Daily News team, which I'm very lucky to be part of, goes there, and it produces several print magazines. So we research and write on site with a team of photographers and journalists. We design it on site, then we have it printed in Amsterdam, in this case, whatever city in the world we happen to be working in. And that gets delivered overnight. So we have a daily physical news copy for attendees. And also we produce then, as you would expect, a website goes along with that, various e-newsletters that go out regularly, et cetera, and increasingly a lot of social media activity as well. So they're great events. The next one is going to be the ITS World Congress in LA. We'll be there for that. When I'm very sorry to say, we'll be missing your meeting in Austin, which is a regret.
We regret that you'll be missing that meeting as well. We do have a question or maybe a comment here from Saeed Majdi. Since nobody should have any interest in dumb transportation systems, when will ITS become just transportation systems?
That's a great question. I can't give you a definitive answer. I think I like having the intelligent bit in because it makes me feel better, but you're absolutely right. It's there will be no logic to it eventually. It'll be a bit like, you don't have a director of the internet anymore in the way that you did, say, in 1999. It would be like having a director of electricity at a company. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It will just be transportation systems, but I think we're some way away from that yet. I suspect as well, it perhaps also reflects the fact that however smart our transportation gets, it can always get smarter. So
it can also, yes, it can always get smarter. It's like the detergent you buy. New and improved are perhaps the most common words that you see on that. It's always getting better, right?
Absolutely.
Adam, I'm always keen to hear about mentors in people's lives. Would you tell us a little bit about who has been the mentors and formed you in your journalism career?
Well, he'd probably be surprised to hear it, but it's a guy called Jeff Hadwick, who was my first editor when I became a journalist. So way back in my early 20s, which sadly was 30 years ago. And Jeff was my first editor. He was, I was very, very lucky, actually. I subsequently discovered how lucky I was to have him as my first role model. And certainly he was a great supporter and advocate of mine. which I greatly appreciated. And he did all that while insulting me on a virtually a daily basis. But that's a Northern English thing. So I'm from the south of England, he's from the north. And his contention always was the more he likes people, the ruder he is to them. And he's on that. He must absolutely adore me, is all I can say. But I'm very fortunate as well, because later on in my career, i.e. now, I've ended up working for him and with him again, because he works at the company Route One Publishing, which produces ITS International. So we have continued the professional relationship, to catch up with the friendly relationship which had gone on in subsequent years. So no, I'm very lucky. And what he taught me, I think, is that you simply have to be yourself. I can't, as a manager, as an editor, as a journalist, I guess in whatever you do in business and in life, you've got to do your thing in your way. I couldn't imitate what he does, much as I might like to try. You have to be your version of it. I don't know if you find this, Pat, but there are some people who can say things which, if you said them, there would be a silence, a hush in the room, and you'd probably be excommunicated. He says them, and everyone finds it hilarious, and it's charming.
Yes.
There you go. You've got to be yourself.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. We started by talking about cricket, and I notice a comment in the chat function here. Farzan Ahmed, who's the executive director of the Ohio Turnpike and Infrastructure Commission, and also serves on the IBTTA board, and as co-chair of our Diversity, Social, and Racial Inclusion Task Force. There you go, Farzan. I got the whole resume in there, almost. He says, yours truly was the founding president of and captain of the Kansas State University cricket team in 1987. So there you have it. From our industry, a great lover and leader in cricket. So Adam, you have a passion for cricket. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, we've got minutes left, and as has been observed, these games can last for 5 days. So the chance of us getting anything meaningful in about cricket is unlikely. But I will say, America has a great relationship with cricket. England teams that played in Australia back in the 20s and 30s, they would come back via Hawaii and LA and so on, and they would play games. The Hollywood Cricket Club was in full swing then. And also, don't forget, the first ever international cricket match was in New York. It was the USA versus Canada in 1844. So the US got there before England did. So you might not have been playing baseball, but that's just simply the way things have worked out. But it's the most wonderful game, and I think partly because of its longevity, the fact that it can take so long to get a result, or indeed, as someone said in the comments, no result at all. Quite possible to play 5 days and get a draw. Well, that's the beauty of it. So yes.
It's a leisurely game. It's a game like baseball that you don't rush through, and there's no clock. There's no time limit. You're finished when the game is over, right?
Yeah, that certainly has been the case in the past. I mean, there are now various formats of the game. So, for example, you can play one called 2020, which can be over in an evening. So that lasts, say, 3 hours. So it's perhaps more comparable with a baseball match. Then you have one-day games, and also the longer games, the 3 and the 5 day games. So sometimes what tends to happen in the longer games is nothing happens, and then a lot happens very, very quickly, and that's the excitement. I think that's where the thrill happens.
So some critics of baseball say that we take 5 minutes of action and cram it into 3.5 hours of play, right?
Well, it was also said that the English invented cricket because they're a godless nation, but needed some concept of the eternal. And I think that's got something in it as well. So, yeah. But no, baseball's a great game as well.
Adam, I'm going to make a couple of announcements, and then I'm going to come back to you for some final words of wisdom.
Sure thing.
Next week, our guest on Café IBTTA is Charles Duncan. Charles is the Chief of Compliance, Legislative, and Cultural Affairs for the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission. He'll talk to us about his career and the work that the commission is doing to advance racial justice, equity, inclusion, and other meaningful opportunities in society. This is part of our effort to spotlight these activities in the IBTTA membership. Our next in-person event is the Road Usage Charging and Finance Conference, May 15 through 17 in Denver. It's held in conjunction with our spring board and committee meetings. Register today. You can do that on the IBTTA website. We have a fabulous program with some of the biggest names in road usage charging and toll finance in the world. Visit the IBTTA website for details on all our in-person and virtual events. Well, Adam, tell us, what final words of wisdom do you have before we sign off today?
Well, one of my favorite authors is an American, a native of Indianapolis, a gentleman called Kurt Vonnegut, who wrote a number of wonderful novels. But one of the things he said has always stuck with me. And he said, enjoy the little things in life, because one day you'll look back and realize they were the big things. So simple, but true, I think. And I think, and Pat, I know we haven't got long. I think also that speaks to the effect that our little actions can have on others. And I don't want to embarrass you, but 2 years ago when the pandemic started and there was a great deal of uncertainty, you posted a video on YouTube, which was you singing a version of a song from Les Mis, which was very charming. You have a lovely singing voice. It was witty. It was gentle. It was very good indeed. And you don't know the ripple effect that things that you do can have, because my in-laws way back in England, I showed the video to them, and at the time I think they were, they're in their 70s and 80s. They're not in the best of health, and they were very, very touched by the fact that you had put this together, and they absolutely loved it. And they played it several times, and they still talk about it. It gave them a little bit of hope and comfort when, at the time, things seemed a little bleaker. So. And I know you didn't know I was going to say that, but it's very true. There is a little corner of Hampshire, England, where Pat Jones is spoken very fondly of by people who've never met him. So legacies come in all sorts of shape and sizes. But seriously, that was a very nice thing that you did, and that was very memorable too.
Adam, thank you so much for that kind memory and recollection. And I also tip my cap to my wife, Mia, who played the piano. She also came up with the newly designed lyrics for that song. So I lent my voice and she lent her creativity and her piano playing.
Well, chapeau to her then, because that was terrific.
Thank you. Adam, it was wonderful having you on the program. Thank you so much. And to all our viewers, be safe, keep in touch, and we'll see you down the road. Thanks, everybody.